To this special debate, we are assessing the performance versus promises of the UPA 2, presenting the report card as 10 years of this government come to a close, and whether or not they return to power is a different story. Opinion polls at this point in time seem to suggest that it's likely to be a BJP-led NDA government, but a lot can change in politics in 24 hours, so we've still got some time before the elections kickstart. I've got a very special set of panelists here with me, and we're going to do this debate style, so I'm going to give each of them 3 minutes to make their opening remarks and then come back for Q&A session. Joining us from the Congress Party, Salman Soz; from the Biju Janata Dal, Jay Panda; from the TMC, Mahua Moitra; representing industry this evening, Vinayak Chatterjee, the neutral voice or the neutral observer on this panel. I'm forcing that onto you, Vinayak. And shortly joining us from the BJP will be Piyush Goyal. So that's our panel for this evening. I'm going to kickstart this off with you, Salman Soz. Defend the UPA's performance, UPA 1, UPA 2, and tell us why you believe there is no gap between what you promised and the performance that you've delivered.
Quite frankly, well, first, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and it's an honor to be with such a distinguished panel. I'm not here to defend the UPA. In fact, I personally do not believe that we need to defend. We need to actually put the facts out. I think sometimes we're very hard on ourselves in this country. I think aspirations have grown, and you know, with that, I think patience has in some ways evaporated. But the facts on the ground of what our country has achieved, the facts are in our favor. There's a breathtaking transformation that has taken place in this country in the last 10 years, and we should be proud of that. Never had I imagined that India would become a middle-income country before my 50th birthday, and I'm pleased to tell you that it's happened well before my 50th birthday. Never had I imagined that this country could actually reduce poverty at a rate that has not been experienced elsewhere, perhaps besides China, and we've done it. Never did I think that this country would become a top investment destination at a time when investor sentiment is extremely down. I'm happy to tell you that India is the top foreign direct investment destination right now. I know people think that, oh, that's not possible, but it is true. I'm talking about investor confidence. When people talk about investor confidence, I'm giving you the facts as reported by different studies. In the last 9 years, we've received 94% of all FDI that India has ever received. 94%, not a joke. Investment ratios and savings ratios have been upwards of 30%. Upwards of 30% even in this difficult climate. Europe, after the Great Recession of 2007-2008, it is now that Europe is coming out of a recession. The United States is not going to reach its growth potential until 2017, mind you. Why are we so hard on ourselves? Where does the despair come from? I think people see a glass half empty. I think the glass is more than half full. I know there's a narrative in this country that paints India as, in a very despairing kind of way. And I know Goyal Saab is coming, and I'm sure he's going to paint it really, really in gloomy terms. But the facts say otherwise.
You've got the last 1 minute.
Okay, the facts are otherwise. And it's not about just numbers. I think if you look at just the most recent IMF World Economic Outlook, the most recent one in January, what does it say? It not only says that India, as of now, right now, and it has been throughout UPA's tenure, India has been the second fastest growing economy in the group of 20 countries. There's the 20 largest countries. India has been the second fastest growing. And it projects that India will remain so. Okay? The World Economic Outlook also gives us one good piece.
The last 30 seconds.
One piece of information. We're going to close the gap with China in growth terms. There's going to be only a 1 percentage point difference between China and India by 2016. I think we've done a remarkable job. We should be proud of it. Yes, not everything has been done. Yes, there are things that have not been done. But a lot of the agenda, whether it's about food security, we've not left the other parts of this country behind. It's not just about growth. Food security, very important. We need to take everyone together. Whether it is right to education, land reforms. After 100 years, we changed India's kind of land law. Companies Act, manufacturing policy. We have all sorts of things going for us, and we have a very young country. I think we should be optimistic. I think India is going to be shining. India is going to be shining in the proper way, not in the 2004 way.
All right.
Shining. India is going to be shining in the proper way, not in the 2004 way.
All right, Salman Soz, well done, on time. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause there for Salman Soz representing the Congress Party. Whether or not he's been able to sell the UPA story, we'll get a vote of hands at the end of this to figure that out. But Piyush Goyal representing the Bharatiya Janata Party, you're going to get 3 minutes to make your case on whether or not you believe the UPA2's report card is an assessment of its promises and its performance being aligned, or has the performance and the promise been divorced?
Well, I think the UPA made certain promises and I was trying to put them on paper, and then I think I ran out of paper because there were so many promises and none of them seem to have been completed. They said they'll give the highest priority to growth, they'll give the highest priority to reform, they'll give employment, they'll revive the growth, promote enterprise, generate employment. Tons and tons of things. National manufacturing will go up to 25% under them. Inflation will be controlled in 100 days. Foreign exchange reserves will grow. I mean, there are so many promises. My office ran out of paper, really. I think we had to buy some more paper. Fiscal deficit, we trust the FRBM Act is important. One day the finance minister actually acknowledged the current FRBM Act is very malleable. It does set out a fiscal deficit target. But if you miss the target, all that you do is go back to and amend the law. The finance minister himself saying it. Then the finance minister criticizes his predecessor very conveniently. Oh, there were policies in 10, 11, 11, 12 which really brought our country to grief. Now I'm going to put a red line and make sure fiscal deficit is not breached. So end of the day, UPA2 brings us growth 9% down to 4.5%. Revised figures now. 4.9 is a promise, but we've seen every figure they've said has always been breached. They talk of inflation being controlled in 100 days. 6 years of unrelentless double-digit inflation. The poor man just doesn't know how to make two ends meet. Food security and all is fine, but I don't think 500 calories of nutrition is going to feed anybody's stomach. And certainly not 10,000 crores, which is the entire additional burden that they have brought through food security.
2 minutes.
Country was already spending close to 1,12,000 crores. They now tom a new bill. We are going to make food a secure item for the nation. What do? They package all the existing schemes, put them together, add 10,000 crores, which is about 60 paisa per capita per day, and they say, now we've made India secure. We made India have enough food grains. My God, I don't know where that ever came from. And then look what do? They don't want to breach the red line of fiscal deficit. Bring down the gross capital formation. Bring down investment in infrastructure. Bring down investment in defense. I mean, I don't know how we are going to protect our border. Some more Jawans will need to be beheaded on the borders before they will bother about spending more on defense and not cutting down defense budget by 15,000 crores. And what did they do? 1,50,000 crores of expenditure reduced. But mind you, not a rupee of wasteful expenditure reduced. They in fact added 60,000 crores to the subsidy bill. Net reduction, 90,000 crores. And what does it comprise of? 77,000 crores of capex. So what they have done is, borrowed $100 billion to meet fiscal deficit, invested in revenue expenditure, and end of the day, your future generations, your and my children, will be repaying this huge debt that they are leaving behind with no infrastructure, no income growth, no jobs. The NDA provided 60 million jobs in 5 years. The UPA provided 2 million, 2.7 million, to give you credit, Salman Bhai. And then look at the external debt. They say we've done very well to manage the current account deficit. We've been very prudent in financing the current account deficit. And what did they do? They had inherited external position which was net positive.
The last 30
$100
seconds.
billion external debt, 111 external debt, 112 reserves. They have raised the external debt to 390 and reserves have come down to 290. So net we are all an impoverished nation at the end of UPA 2, and certainly not a situation the people of India are happy about.
Your time is up. Big round of applause there to Piyush Goyal for demolishing the UPA. Over to you, Jay Panda, to present the third front and the BJD's point of view.
I don't think you need me or anybody to really pass judgment on the UPA's performance. If you do a straw poll of the audience here, I think they'd tell you that it's been pretty dismal. But this may not be a representative audience. I think if you do a straw poll of all your viewers, you'd still get a feedback that it's pretty dismal. You could argue that that's not representative. So let's forget about your channel's viewers. Look at the opinion polls that are coming out from all across the country, from every nook and cranny, from the so-called Aam Aadmi, which this government originally wanted to espouse. The feedback is that the performance is dismal. They don't want this government back in power, and I think they themselves acknowledge that in their statements. They try to blame some of the mismanagement of the economy on the external situation, the global economic crisis, but that actually has very little to do with it. As my friend Salman was pointing out, we are today even just now on the fringes of being a middle-income country, which means there's tremendous headroom for us to grow internally, irrespective of how the world economy performs, just like happened in 1997. But what do? You send all the wrong signals to industry, to the economy, to the stock markets. So forget about FDI coming in. The fact is that we are getting much less than what we ought to be getting. But forget about FDI coming in. Ask the captains of industry in this room and outside, and they will all tell you that they have gone slow on their investment plans in this country. Domestic investment is being held back because of lack of confidence in this government. I want to cite a statistic which I think most Indians have heard about. About 3 decades ago, then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi made a stunning declaration that of every rupee that government spends, only 15 paisa reaches the citizen. 85 paisa gets lost either in administrative cost or in leakages, in corruption. You know, a lot of people don't know what that figure is today. I keep getting asked. I have a number for you. If you look at the Planning Commission statistics, there is a study which has studied the PDS, the very Food Security Act that Salman and Piyush have been mentioning. The figure when it comes to PDS is that of every rupee today spent by the government, 27 paisa reaches the citizen. So 73 paisa goes away in administrative cost, goes away in corruption. What do? You actually need to tackle the root cause of that problem. And the irony is, this government has been sitting on some really interesting ideas and has just not been pushing them hard enough. Take a look at the identification Aadhaar project.
Last minute, Jay.
Okay. Now, that has provided enormous scope to actually re-engineer the system so that money can go directly to citizens and you bypass the leaky, creaky government system. They sat on it, they delayed it, even now they are not pushing it hard enough. The government sends out conflicting signals. On the one hand, over the last 1 year, the finance minister has been cracking down on every rupee to try and keep the fiscal deficit to the 4.8% that has been promised. On the other hand, the leaders of the ruling party go out announcing largesse after largesse, which is totally contrary to what the government is doing. If the government does not send out a united message, it's not going to happen. Final point, you've seen massive corruption in this government, which has actually socked it to the country in the solar plexus. This is why the Indian citizen has lost confidence in this government. You can argue that you've had corruption before, and you can argue that some of this corruption, whether in spectrum or in other areas, is because old systems were continued. But systems change, as economies change, as countries mature. The real tragedy is not that the government did anything unknowingly. They put out white papers, proposed alternative, cleaner, transparent, level playing field systems, and then decided not to do it. So the message that goes out, this government is basically incompetent and it needs to be changed.
Jayapanda, thanks very much.
Needs to be changed.
Jayapanda, thanks very much. From the BJD, and now over to Mahua Moitra of the TMC, possibly could be a member of the Third Front as well, if the Third Front were to be a reality. Mahua, over to you. Your time starts now.
Well, I have nothing personal, Salman, but I think the UPA today stands out as perhaps the most delusional government we've ever seen. It's probably a government in paralysis, but the government and every one of its spokesmen are in a complete state of denial. When I hear them talk and they say, you know, the situation on the ground is different. Yes, the situation on the ground is different, because the India that you're projecting and these billboards everywhere on some, you know, a zillion crores being spent on this ad campaign have nothing to do with reality. And you know, I'm not going to say, all right, your red line was 4.8% or your red line was 4.9%, and we've reached 95% of that in the first 3 quarters, so you've only got 2 months to sort of, you know, drastically cut down on spending, to come out, fudge the numbers, to come and say, oh, you know what, we're at 4.78, so technically we're below 4.8. I don't think anyone in India today is nickeling and diming anymore. No one. I don't think anyone's bothered. India can be divided even today, sadly, even 65 years after independence, into the haves and the have-nots. And we speak for people on, I would say, the wrong side of a good life today. And when I mean that, I mean people who are struggling to just have 3 meals. Are these people better off under the UPA? And the answer, whether you take a straw poll in this room, of the people who are working in this hotel, on the people who are getting the car outside, people who are sitting in a village in Bengal, in Gujarat, in Delhi, anywhere, in a Congress-ruled state, anywhere, you look at it, the answer is a resounding no. You can ask a survey of 5,000 people, 50,000 people, 5 lakh people, the answer is going to be no. And you know what? It doesn't come down to nickeling and diming about 1 basis point to 20 basis points of a headline number. What it comes to is, if you look at what the average person is thinking of, he's thinking of roti, kapra on makan. Even till today, it's sarak, bijli, pani. Okay? So out of that, let's look at just plain food inflation. You have food inflation of 60%. You had vegetable inflation, vegetable prices inflation of 60% year on year in 1 year. Onion prices up 300%. You know, the Delhi government fell and people said, oh, there's a Commonwealth Games scam. If you go into a slum today and you say, did you vote out this government because they can't account for 20,000 crores of money, it doesn't mean anything. But if you tell them, did you vote out this government because onions went from 18 rupees to 80 rupees, they'll say yes. And that's the point you're missing. That's the point you're missing. Under this UPA government, people are struggling to put 3 basic meals on the table. People are eating once a day. We are in villages where people say we eat at 3 in the afternoon. I say, why do you eat at 3 in the afternoon? Just because it's late enough so we don't feel hungry for dinner, and it's not that early so we can get through half the day. Is there anything more pathetic than that?
Your final minute.
Sorry?
Final minute. And then you've got this ad campaign, which I think the only person you're sort of fooling are the 10 people still left in the Congress, honestly. It's almost like you've got to keep the myth going, because you have this thing which says, you know what, these huge ads, I don't even know how much they're spending, huge ads in the paper. I'll just take one example. It says 80 crore, this government has put 80 crore people under the, inside the purview of 2 kgs and 3 kg rice and wheat. Now, as far as I know, and I'm reasonably well informed about these things, 2 kgs and 3 kgs are being offered to per kilo, is 2 rupees and 3 rupees are being offered to people below the poverty line. There are 120 billion population in this country. If you're giving it to 80 crore people by your own ad, that means you're giving it to 68% of the population. We have the head of the planning commission saying the poverty line, people below the poverty line are only 22%. So what is wrong? What is wrong? Either you're giving it to 22%, or you have 68% who are below the poverty line. What's the right number? So breathtaking doesn't even begin. Breathtaking doesn't even begin. That's all I have to say. Mahua Moitra, thanks very much for representing the TMC there. He's going to hope that you're going to bat on his side, Vinayak Chatterjee. It really is over to you to give Salman So some help this evening. All right, go ahead. Your time starts now.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Shri. I find myself rather interestingly placed between friends who all have affiliations with political parties. I don't, and you've in a sense called me here to represent the point of industry. Well, it's not easy to represent the point of view of industry as a whole, but let me see if I can do justice to that. I think going back, industry was happy with UPA 1, in as much of the country was and voted the UPA, Congress and the UPA back to power. But industry has been and is unhappy with UPA too. One can't deny that. That's the prevalent mood. The question really is, there are so many issues that if I were to summarize, what really is the overriding factor with which you can encapsulate the negativism of industry vis-a-vis UPA2, I would use 4 alphabets for it, which I have used earlier, which is DPLS, decision paralysis led slowdown. This encapsulates broadly everything that has happened vis-a-vis industry and has led to negativism from industry. Now, what is DPLS? How has it impacted? Very broadly, the peak growth that we saw at 9% GDP was broadly, very simply, broken into 4.5% of consumption-driven growth and 4.5% of investment-driven growth. Now, consumption-driven growth has its own drivers, which is many steps removed from the investment moods. But what happened to the 4.5%, which was investment-led growth, just crashed. Now that's the truth, and all kinds of economic figures will point towards it. So I'm just summarizing it by saying that decision paralysis-led slowdown in UPA2 is something which is a fact of life. The fact that investment-led growth collapsed is a fact of life, and therefore industry is not. Certainly, it would be wrong on my part to stand here representing industry's point of view and say we were overjoyed with UPA. We are not overjoyed at all. In fact, we are pretty negative on the performance of UPA too in this sphere. Now, the real issue in this debate, Shireen, is looking back. It is easy. All of us in this room and all my esteemed panelists, we have hundreds of sticks to beat the UPA with. You know them, we know them. The question is, do you want me to read out those 40 or 50 sticks with which to beat the UPA? And I'm going to do something else. I asked myself driving into this discussion, if I were to, 4 or 5 years later, if I were to look back and ask myself, what were the positives that I remember? And I will just read out the 6 positives in whatever balance time I have left. I think the UPA government did well on infrastructure investments. I have a selective perception, so please pardon me that, because that's the sector I earn my living. If you see the 11th plan figures, the UPA government achieved 93% of the infrastructure target, which was considered ambitious. 500 billion was considered ambitious, and we did 93% of that. That's something in life in this period that I will take back as a positive. And many sectors did very well. Roads did 115%, power did 93%, and this is bang in the middle of UPA 2, with take off from UPA 1 also. The second point is, I think on the power distribution front, it pushed together a very bold package for distribution reform. It certainly pushed the PPA agenda hard. There have been problems, there have been wars, there have been all kinds of accusations, but it pushed the PPA agenda hard. I will remember in this period a positive of the Prime Minister himself and the UPA pushing the nuclear agenda, with all its ramifications in terms of getting Indian power sector to rely a little more on the nuclear agenda. I am personally, and I know that the rest of industry doesn't broadly agree with me, but I am personally have sufficient and reasonable appreciation for the process in which the Land Acquisition Act was crafted, was discussed, and then finally passed. So Land Acquisition Act remains in my mind as a positive of this period. And finally, at the late stage, I think they should have woken up earlier, but at the late stage, it did put together a fighting institutional response to clear logjam projects through the intervention of the Cabinet Committee on Investments and the National, the Project Monitoring Group, which many states are emulating today. So this broadly is my summary, saying I cannot deny the fact that industry is upset with UPA 2. No, that's 6 if you want me to read them out again.
No. Infrastructure, roads, power distribution, PPA.
Infrastructure, DISCOM restructuring, PPP agenda, nuclear agenda, land acquisition, CCI. That's 6.
All right.
That's 6, right? So in summary, if you were to summarize, industry unhappy. Why is industry unhappy? Single banner, shall I say the banner statement, DPLS, decision paralysis linked slowdown, the killing of investment-led growth. But as an individual, trying to ask myself a challenging question, what are the 6 positives I can think about in this period that the UPA government did? I just read them out for you.
Salman Soz is going to be very happy with you, Vinayak Chatterjee. Vinayak Chatterjee, big round of applause there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm coming back to you now for a rebuttal. You've heard what the other panelists have had to say. Salman Soz, before I get started with the Q&A, your rebuttal, 2 minutes.
Okay.
If you can use the microphone, that'll be better.
And I got extra time.
Yeah.
You did, because we interrupted.
I was going to rattle off these numbers as well, but I want to ask you people one thing. Do we want all Indians to progress together or not? I think nobody in this room can disagree with that. But I want to take issue with what Piyush ji said about job creation. And let me tell you why NDA lost. And they should remember that. And Mama, yes, Mama, we are in touch with what's happening on the ground. And let me tell you why UPA 2 has evolved the way it has. Between 2000 and 2005, this is an interesting story because not many people know what happened to the NDA. What happened to India Shining? Between 2000 and 2005, 2 crore men left rural India because of distress. 2 crore. They talk about 5-6 crore jobs. Let me tell you what the jobs were. The quality of jobs is important. 2 crore men left rural India because they could not make ends meet. The situation was so bad that women, elderly people, and young children had to get into the job market. They joined the workforce, and that's how you got 2 crore extra jobs during NDA's time. They lost. What happened when the UPA came in? Narega came in. A wage floor was put in place. Men started moving back from their semi-urban areas back. And by the way, these are facts. Men started moving back. Women felt they could move out of the labor force. Children, because of heavy investment in our education sector and health sector, they started staying in school. Gross enrollment ratios in primary, middle, secondary schools are the highest this country's ever known. That means children are staying longer in schools. That's a good thing. If you have a gap in jobs, it's not a bad thing because these kids are learning. They're gaining skills. So, their job story, their job story is incomplete. On this whole notion of confidence. Oh, by the way, sorry, Aadhaar. Aadhaar is going to be an amazing thing for this country. Despite this recent setback on DBTs and LPG, it's going to be one of the biggest things this country has ever known. It's going to cut down on the leakages that Jay talked about. 60 crore people now have Aadhaar. 30 more crore people are going to be enrolled in 4 more states. Aadhaar is going to be extended to 90 crore people in this country. It's going to be a huge thing. On confidence, Paul Krugman, the famous US economist, talks about confidence fairies that Jay seems to believe in. This whole business of if there is confidence and everything is going to be okay. The fact of the matter is, your colleagues in other countries and you people are going to benefit from the India story. Why? Countries like China, where manufacturing is in a slump, those manufacturing positions are going to be opening up in this country, and people are already taking advantage of that. Are going to be opening up in this country, and people are already taking advantage of that. There are lots of things happening.
Final 10 seconds, Salman.
Lots of things happening. This whole doom and gloom, we are talking down the Indian economy. This is a BJP staple. I disagree with it fundamentally. This whole notion that we are not connected with the people, the elections, when the opinion polls have said all they could, when the real people vote, I'm confident that all of India is going to have a message for everybody, and we will respect that. But we could have done a lot more. Yes, not everything has been done, but we try to carry everybody together, from the rich to the poor, because everybody is an Indian, and that's what we believe in. Inclusive growth is a good thing for India. Trickle-down economics is a bad thing for India, and that is what Mr. Piyush Goyal is telling you. Mr. Modi, by the way, Mr. Modi is selling you what the UPA has already made. We already made what he is selling. Please review what he talked about at FICCI, and then see what we have done. We've already done it.
Salman Sirs, thanks very much. That was a quick rebuttal there coming in from Salman Sirs. I'm going to come back now to each one of you. Mahua, you have a quick point to make, and then I'll come to you, Piyush Goyal. Go ahead.
I didn't have this on my fingertips, so I just quickly looked this up. And he says that urban migration has actually gone down. I just looked at the census numbers. So now census numbers per decade. So 91 to 2001, rural migration grows more than urban migration. But 2001 to 2011, the 10 years, out of which 2004 and 2010, so majority of which was under UPA rule, for the first time, urban migration was more than rural migration by over 500,000. So that point stands rebutted right there.
All right.
Averages.
What is average? What is India? What is average?
All right.
I mean, you've all had your say.
You've all had your say. This is not Parliament. I don't have pepper spray on me, so let's get down to the question and answer. Piyush Goyal, let me ask you this, and you know, we've had this business of fake encounter with facts and so on and so forth, Mr. Chidambaram versus Mr. Modi. So let me put this to you. And is there not some degree of legitimacy to what Salman Sood says when you present the numbers that you present as far as economic growth is concerned? Under the NDA, under the Vajpayee government, the average growth rate was 5.9%. First 4 years of the UPA, the average was 7.3%. Even in the worst period, that is the 2 worst years that we've seen, the average has been 4%. At least as far as the facts are concerned, in terms of economic growth numbers, you cannot quibble that they delivered better than the NDA.
I would have expected better from you. The fact of life is what they inherited. And if you look up the economic survey of 2004, was a robust economy, growing at over 8%, inflation down to 2 or 3%, foreign exchange reserves at $113 billion.
But they also had to contend with the worst financial crisis in 2008.
We also had to contend with the Asian crisis, with an earlier oil shock. We had to contend with the sanctions after Pokhran. So all that is excuses. I think Mr. Vajpayee never gave excuses. He believed in action, not acts, and not promises that they have been doing. But, and Mr. Modi's facts have always been right. I would love Mr. Chidambaram to come for a debate. I'm happy to debate any economic statistic, any issue under the earth with Mr. Chidambaram.
Okay.
Averages are a tool only to show something which is grossly their fault, that when we brought it from 4 to 8, left it for them in such a robust state, they've messed it up and brought it down to 4% again with double-digit inflation. So I don't think its averages matter. What matters is the well-being of the future. As Dr. Arvind Panagriya said, UPA 1 reaped what NDA sowed, and UPA 2 is reaping what UPA 1 sowed. Is
Arvind Panagriya going to be the chief economic advisor if the BJP and the NDA were to come to power?
Well, I'm not the Prime Minister. We'll decide that later. Now look at the issues that have been flagged off. Narega. Just for his kind information, the NSSO statistic says Narega accounts for only 0.7% of rural employment. Just to set the record from his government statistic, schools in PISA rankings, in any ranking which has taken place in the last few years, Indian quality of education is only deteriorating, but this government has a solution for everything. When they found in PISA rankings, our students were ranking 73 out of 74. They sorted it out in a jiffy. We just stopped participating in the PISA rankings. So no problem. No more do we know how bad we are. Aadhaar cards. Do you want Bangladeshi illegal residents to get a Ashoka Chakra Aadhaar card and then be entitled to all our rights and privileges in India? Are you looking for illegal immigrants also being covered under Aadhaar?
So let me ask you this: if you were to come to power, what do you intend to do as far as the NREGS is concerned? What do you intend to do as far as the Aadhaar is concerned? Will you take forward the Aadhaar project?
In terms of Narega has to be an asset-creating exercise. Narega has to provide sustainable employment, not as an insurance or not as a means to give out doles for 20, 30 days. I would convert it into a skill development program. I would teach the people how to fish rather than giving them crumbs, and make them employable, make them ready to earn an honest day's living, empower them rather than make them, I have used the word before on TV on which they have gone around talking all over about the word impotent. They need to check the dictionary. They are actually making Indian people dependent on doles rather than empowering them. The sad part is the Congress believes when they can't meet their revenue targets, harass the taxpayers. When they can't meet school quality education, just tom-tom, we've got 100% enrollment. When they fail to control inflation, they use inflation to show exports have gone up from 2 lakh to 16 lakh crores. You do inflation at 30%, you don't even need 16 lakh, you can do 100 lakh crores of exports.
Let's talk about the future, and I want to get all of you to comment on the promises that you are going to make to the voter.
I would have demolished all the 6 points that Vinayak said also.
I'll come to you.
Nuclear power, I've not seen one nuclear project come up.
I'll come to you to demolish Vinayak. I'll come to you.
After they mess up the economy,
Piyush Goyal, I will come to you to demolish.
After they mess up the process of approvals, Ministers are fighting day and night. One minister messes up for 3 years for...
I mean, we can demolish everything that you've talked about so far.
Can we have order in the House?
Can we demolish
Can we have order in the House?
Give us some time, we'll demolish everything that you talk about. If
You've done a very good job of demolishing the country. I don't think you need to demolish anything else. You've done a pretty good job there.
Can we please have order? Thank you very much.
Demolish everything that you talk about. If
You've done a very good job of demolishing the country. I don't think you need to demolish anything else. You've done a pretty good job there.
Can we please have order? Thank you very much. All right. Jai Panda.
Clearly, when you have the BJP and the Congress going at each other, you need something like pepper spray to control.
But then the Congress only brings the pepper spray.
No. All right. Enough. Time out, gentlemen. Time out.
This is why I think the
Congress MP.
This is why I think the country can do better than the Congress and the BJP. But let me explain. Clearly, some of the defense put up are not legitimate. For example, Land Acquisition Act is being talked about as an achievement. You know, we all know that within 3 weeks of the Land Acquisition Act being passed, the Power Ministry, part of this government, has appealed to the Prime Minister's office for a workaround, because it is not working for the ultra-mega power projects. Within 3 weeks, same government, two arms of the same government. I don't even want to get into the argument that lower job creation is somehow better. I think I'll leave it to the audience. But, you know, similarly, the BJP can come up with cuckoo voodoo economics. Okay? Now, Aadhaar card, it may be an idea that has been propagated by this government, but it's a good idea. Because he talked about Bangladeshis taking advantage of Indian services. Today, that is happening. Millions of Bangladeshis are taking advantage of Indian services. Aadhaar card is neutral to that. It's not going to give them citizenship. It's not going to take away citizenship. Aadhaar card is the identity of a person. This person is this person or not. You can then decide who is a citizen, who is not a citizen. Separate issue. Don't mix up the two. And if you do, then you are talking voodoo economics, and you should not do that. I just want to conclude by saying one thing. One of the arguments that hasn't come up but often comes out in public is that somehow coalition governments are to blame. I want to point out to your audience, every single government in the last 25 years has been a coalition government. Some of them have been managed better, and I agree, Vajpayee ji was a better manager of coalitions. Current one has not been managed better. Stability is not an issue. This government, this Prime Minister has been there for 10 years. Stability is not an issue. What is required is leadership. Because you have to go out and sell your ideas. The top leaders of this government do not open their mouths normally. Now, I want to end with just one final example. One final example. And the final example is, look at the GST. It's been stuck for so many years. It's bad for the country. We had a similar situation 10 years ago with VAT. States were resistant.
But who do you blame for the debacle of the GST? Do you blame the BJP or do you blame the Congress?
Will you allow me a minute? I'll just explain. I'll take 30 seconds. In the case of the VAT, it took magnanimous leadership from the central government because the states were afraid they would lose revenue. The center said, we'll underwrite your revenue loss if it happens. In the event, no revenue loss happened, no state needed to be given any money, it went through. Today what's happened is, GST has been left in the hands of a committee. When did the Prime Minister go to any state capital and try to persuade the leader of a regional party that this is good for the country, please come on board? You need that kind of leadership. If you look at what happens in...
But consultations have been on for over 2 years.
You do not solve problems by committee. You need leadership. Has the Prime Minister spoken out? Has the leader of the UPA spoken out? Have they tried to convince the parties who are in the coalition? My answer is, the government that's going to come after this election, no matter whether it is a UPA government, NDA government, Third Front or anything, it is going to be a coalition government. Please be clear about that. It will require leadership which has to go out and sell policies across the coalition, which is not being done today.
Before I come to Mahua, Piyush Goyal, it's going to be a coalition government, says Jai Panda.
Well, it's going to be possibly a coalition government with a very strong BJP at the center. Possibly, if the people desire a good, stable administrator, decisive leadership, visionary leadership, they may give the BJP 272 plus, which is my mission. But we will still take on board our partners with respect, like Mr. Vajpayee did. The leader always believed in taking his party and the opposition along. And I promise you, the BJP believes in that. Come 2014 May, we will give decisive, stable leadership to a government, to a group of parties which have come together, largely coalescing around a large central BJP.
Okay, Mahua Moitra, I want to come to you on the point that Jai made that, we are going to have to live with coalition governments, and it's a question of managing the coalition partners to actually get the reform agenda moving. Trinamool Congress, some would say played spoiler as far as the UPA is concerned. If the freight rates were hiked, if the railway passenger fares were hiked for the first time in a decade, you actually had the railway minister being sacked, not by the government, but by your party leader on account of that. FDI, no. Hike in diesel prices, no. Market-determined rates as far as other consumer products are concerned, no. So how do we get back to the path of fiscal consolidation? How do we get India to be an attractive investment destination if you're going to basically say no to everything that's on the reform agenda?
Okay. I take strong exception to what you just said, simply because who determines what this reform agenda is? This reform agenda that you're talking about, is the UPA's reform agenda?
No, let me finish.
Give me 30 seconds. Let me finish, okay? So a coalition is not the incontinent abandonment of all principles. Okay? It isn't. When you're running a coalition, we've heard, the things that have come out of the UPA government, you said when a coalition partner or when this government was guilty of embezzlement, to use a fairly strong term, to the tune of between 20 and 40,000 crores, they said, you know what, we have compulsions due to coalition. Well, you know what, when the Trinamool Congress turned around and said that a family of 4 in this country, a middle-class family which has no access to any other source of fuel than liquefied petroleum gas, needs at least a minimum of 1 cylinder a month. It is not possible to cook a meal for a family of 4, if 3 meals a day or less than 1 cylinder a month. You cannot remove the subsidy. You removed the subsidy and made it 6 cylinders, right? Whose reform agenda was that? For a country where 22% only, by your own admission, the poverty line is such that even if you take the UPA's numbers, you have 300 million people in this country. Even by the UPA's numbers, which we contest, by the way, living below 27 rupees a day.
So if the TMC were to be part of a third front that would come to power, you would do away with this business of hiking diesel prices every month. You would do away with the cap as far as LPG subsidies.
Yes, we would definitely do away with the cap on LPG. We would definitely, if we did come in with a cap, it would be a realistic cap. The 6 cylinders a year is not a realistic cap. Who sets this reform agenda? And by the way, the most important thing is when we entered into a coalition with them, we have a manifesto, they have a manifesto, right? It says very clearly in our manifesto that this FDI in retail is not acceptable to us, right? We were part of the coalition on that basis with no discussion whatsoever, after assuring us, so everyone from the Prime Minister to the Finance Minister to the Home Minister in Parliament says there will be nothing on FDI without saying they come in and take this. You mean to tell me, can anyone trust this government?
So are you
saying they come in and take this? You mean to tell me, can anyone trust this government?
So are you only opposed to FDI in retail? Are you opposed to FDI in general?
We're definitely opposed to FDI in retail, and we will examine other things as and when they come.
Okay,
but there has to be a discussion.
That's pretty much saying that you're opposed to most. But Jai Panda, I want you to come in on what Mahua just said as far as diesel, LPG is concerned. We're talking about an oil subsidy bill which runs into lakhs of crores of rupees. Would you, if you were part of the third front, go back on what this government has attempted to do as far as linking petrol to market prices and diesel to market prices are concerned?
I think if you look at the history of diesel and fuel prices, various governments have kept going back and forth. They've kept going back to market prices, they've kept going back to administered prices. It's because of political compulsions. And I'll be frank with you, any government, whether it's a BJP, Congress, third front, will have political compulsions. So rather than talk about specific issues, I'd like to say that if you take a basket of issues of maybe 10 economic decisions that are going to either move the country forward or not move it forward, I'm reasonably confident that on 6 or 7 of them we can make some progress.
So give me those 6 or 7 issues that you believe there will be consensus and that we can rely on to take growth rates back to 8-9%.
Okay, off the cuff I may not be able to give you 6 or 7. Let me just tell you, I think GST is possible.
Okay.
I told you that it requires the leadership in Delhi to go out and sell it in the states.
Okay.
I think an idea like the Aadhaar idea should be and can be pushed through, because you've got that huge gap of every rupee going down to the citizen. 73 paisa is leaking out. So I think that is something that can be pushed through. I don't want to make a hard commitment on fuel prices. You know it's a sensitive issue. So it will require discussion. But like this, I think if we start with the assumption that a common minimum program would agree to a fiscal deficit number. I don't want to give you a number. Somebody was suggesting 4%, somebody was suggesting can you stick to 4.8%. There's a lot of jugglery that's been taking place pushing this year's expenditure to next year. But whatever it is, I think if we can agree to a conservative number, then that sets the parameter from which you can then negotiate with coalition partners that this is what it permits us to do and this is what it doesn't permit us to do.
Okay, Vinay?
You know, listening to my colleagues here, I was asking myself that if I move away from specifics and once again hold the brief of industry to ask ourselves with some degree of, consensus building across different constituents of industry as to why was industry or why is industry upset with UPA 2, I have five constructs for you to consider. One is, as Jay rightly said, the UPA had a bunch of great ideas, whether it is Aadhaar or even people have forgotten special economic zones and many other ideas. It was not, it was, let me finish.
That was a ND idea.
Okay,
let your facts right.
Anyway,
in fact messed it up.
Doesn't matter. It was pushed hard by Kamal Nath when he was the minister. So
what? That was what?
No, it was pushed hard. I'm not denying it was your idea. I'm not denying it's your idea. But let me finish, because I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking.
But I'm just correcting.
Just a minute.
Sure.
Let me wrong. Yeah, you correct me after I finish.
Sure.
But anyway.
Go ahead.
So, therefore, the first point is that it had a bunch of great ideas, which it was unable to push through, and therefore the conversion of strategy to intent doesn't seem to happen. It's a sign of weak leadership. The second issue is that genuinely it had a bunch of seasoned politicians, seasoned leaders across decades who actually, if they had worked together with a common cause, would have been able to push this nation forward. But somehow the team, instead of working together, pulled in disparate directions. That left industry extremely unhappy. The third reason is that there is a general feeling in industry that this period saw a lot of institution destruction. Whether it is the Ministry of Environment and Forests, whether it is the way the telecom auctions were handled then under Mr. Raja, there was a lot of institution destruction and people turned a blind eye, and that made us very unhappy. The other is that, it just didn't understand the spate of populist giveaways. Is all right when the cake is increasing fast, if GDP growth is increasing fast, but when that is not happening, to cut out larger slices and give it away as socialist or populist handouts is something that nobody has taken kindly to. And finally, much of this inflation business, at least from whatever economics I have read, is fundamentally supply-side driven. So it requires modification of the APMC Act, of transportation logistics, of cold storages. The government just didn't apply its mind to, removing supply-side bottlenecks causing inflation, and were constantly putting pressure on the RBI to decrease interest rates.